Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Chandigarh Judicial Academy webinar organized in collaboration with SCC Online. My name is Chetan Singh Gill. I am your host for today's webinar, and I welcome you all to today's webinar. Today's webinar is on Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, amended up to date for the relevance of state judiciary, district judiciary. Today's session will be taken by Honorable Mr. Justice Anil Kshetrapal, sir. Sir, I had a pleasure with having another previous session with sir as well. So this is my second session with sir. I'm sure everyone knows sir. Sir has been working as a lordship in Punjab and State Judiciary. Sir was born on 19th of November 1964, and he hails from Kurukshetra. Having a legal background as his father, Shri S.P. Khetarwal was also a practicing advocate in Kurukshetra. In 1987, after completing LLB, my lordship got enrolled in Bar Council of Punjab and Haryana. Lordship started practice at Kurukshetra in 1987. Thereafter, in May 1988, my lordship shifted his practice to PNH High Court and joined the office of Honorable Mr. Justice V.K. Pali, who's now a Chief Justice, retired. In 1991, Sir started his independence practice in civil and constitutional side. In 2014, was designated as senior advocate by the Punjab and Haryana High Court. His lordship was elevated as an additional judge of Punjab and Haryana High Court, Chandigarh, on 10th of July 2017. With so much of practice, so much of experience in the field as an advocate and as a judge, Sir is today going to be helping us understand the nitty-gritties and the basics that was required to understand Arbitration and Conciliation Act. Without any further ado, I would request Sir, and first of all, I'll welcome Sir. Welcome for coming for the session and agreeing to give your time. And I would request you to please start the session, and we will take the question answer in the last. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Chetan. Good morning, everyone. Basically, I will just divide this session into three major parts and then we'll discuss. First is with regard to introduction. Second is with regard to civil judges. And third is with regard to superior judicial. Now, what is arbitration? We all have heard from our parents, grandparents, that there used to be a system of Salas or Panch Parmeshwar. Those were the words used. That was basically a traditional method of arbitration. One would, the parties having some dispute would authorize somebody as a Salas, appoint as a Salas, and then he will give hearing and decide. That was informal way of deciding these cases. Then in villages, sarpanches, panches, Panch Parmeshwar was a basic concept that they will hear both the sides and then decide. Then with the passage of time and progress made, the concept of arbitration was statutorily recognized and acts were enacted and various amendments have been made. Initially, there was 1940 Act, Arbitration Act, which dealt with only domestic arbitration. And there were certain flaws which required to be totally amended to meet the needs of the progress the society has made. That's how in 1996, this new act, that is the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, was enacted. Now, there has been 3 amendments since the day this has been enacted. First amendment is of 2015. Second amendment is of 2019, and third amendment is recent 2021. That is the brief background. Apart from Arbitration Act, this act also deals with conciliation. Effort is that if the parties before arbitration can conciliate, resolve the dispute, so therefore there is no need of arbitration. But today's topic is not on conciliation, so I am not referring there to. Now, arbitrations are of two types. Basic arbitration is based on agreement. Arbitration and Conciliation Act is based on agreement. If the parties have agreed to arbitration at any stage, then they can get their dispute resolved through a process of arbitration. That is first part. Everyone must have seen that this concept of arbitration has been even introduced in CPC by adding section 89. Section 89 provides that if the parties agree, then the court can refer the parties to the arbitration. So this is the basic concept of arbitration based on agreement. There are other types of arbitration. Those are called statutory arbitrations. Like everybody must have seen or noticed that under the National Highway Authority Act, whenever the acquisition takes place, and if the landowner is not satisfied with the award given by the competent authority, then he can apply for reference to arbitration. That is statutory thing. There is no agreement, but the act says that if the landowner is not satisfied with the compensation given or a market value determined, he can request for arbitration. Similarly, in Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act 2006, there is a statutory arbitration that if any of the enterprises falling within the meaning micro, small or medium has a dispute, then they can go to Facilitation Council. Facilitation Council can first make a conciliatory effort. If it fails, it can further arbitrate or it can nominate an arbitrator. So therefore, in the case of arbitration under that Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act 2006 are based on statutory provisions. Then such statutory interpretations, arbitration can be found in our Cooperative Societies Act. Punjab Act, Haryana Act both provide that if there is a dispute, without there being any agreement, the parties can be referred to arbitration and arbitration would proceed. So that is again a separate part which we can deal on some other day. But as a just cautioning you about, there is a very, very significant amendment in 2015, which has been introduced by Act number 3 of 2016. Of course, the Act has been published in the Gazette in 2016, but it has come into force from 23rd November 2015. Please note this. This will be very, very important for all of you to understand why this has been enforced from a particular date. Now, first thing, let us now shift our focus to the definition part. The word court has been defined in section 2, subsection E. If we carefully see that definition, it says jurisdiction of the principal civil court of original jurisdiction in a district. I am repeating, the principal civil court of original jurisdiction in a district. Now, if we want to see its meaning, that which are those codes, then we have to refer to section 2, subsection 4 of Code of Civil Procedure, where what is the principal civil court of original jurisdiction in a district has been defined. Why this is important, I am just trying to emphasize, and that's why I will just highlight that. Basically, in the Statute or Arbitration and Conciliation Act, two words have been used interchangeably. One is principal civil, the code, first is of code, and second is of judicial authority. The word judicial authority has been used in section 8 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. The difference I will just highlight. Basically, the principal civil court of original jurisdiction in a district is the courts of district judges and additional district judges. Civil judges do not fall within the definition of court as far as this Arbitration and Conciliation Act is concerned. So please be clear that whenever the word court has been used, then the civil judges do not have the jurisdiction. It is only the district judges or additional district judges who have the power under the Act. Second thing, the important amendment is in definition of international commercial arbitration, that is defined in section 2 clause F. Now what has been done, that qua the disputes which are falling within the definition of international commercial arbitration, even the courts of district judges and additional district judges have been, the jurisdiction has been excluded. So that means that whenever their dispute comes about a case which falls within the definition of international commercial arbitration, then district courts do not have jurisdiction. Now, what are the international commercial arbitration? There are 4 clauses in section 2F. The most important is individual who is a national or habitually resident in any country other than India. That means if one of the party to the agreement is resident of a foreign nation or abroad and he is habitually residing therein, he enters into an agreement with the, even if an Indian national, such arbitration agreement falls within the definition of international commercial arbitration. Second is body corporate, which is incorporated out of country. Third is an association or a body of individual whose control and management lies outside country. And 4 is government of a foreign country. So therefore, whenever, even if the agreement has been entered into in India, it is governed by Indian law, but still the district courts, for the purpose of jurisdiction I'm talking about, district courts do not get jurisdiction. It is only the High Court which gets the jurisdiction. Now this is the basically definition. Now I will turn my focus on the scope of judicial intervention. If one carefully sees and examines sections 5, it provides that no judicial authority to intervene except where so provided. The words are very important. In plain and simple words, the court would not interfere unless it is specifically provided in the Act. So judicial intervention in arbitration proceeding has been limited, and court's intervention has been circumscribed by saying that only and only if it is provided in the Act, the courts would interfere. Otherwise, the judicial authority would interfere. I'm sorry, I use the word judicial authority. The word used is judicial authority. This is basic object, or this is the basic scheme, because this arbitration is a alternate resolution forum. Once it is the parties opt for it, mostly by agreement, then judicial intervention has to be minimal. I am using the word because the requirement is that jurisdiction of the civil court, except wherever it is provided, is barred. Except wherever provided means that wherever the Act permits, the court can interfere, otherwise it can't. And as we go further, we'll come to know that the scope of interference is very, very limited. Now let us go to the section of civil judges as well as additional district and additional district judges. First important provision in the Act is Section 8. Section 8 provides that the court has the power to refer the parties to arbitration where there is an arbitration agreement. Please don't confuse this with a power of referring or nominating an arbitrator. I'm again stressing on this. Section 8 is only with reference to a pending litigation, and if a party in that pending litigation moves an application saying that since there is an arbitration clause, since there is an arbitration agreement, therefore the court should refer the parties to the arbitration. Now there is a significant shift. That's why I started with saying that after 1940 Act, 1996 Act has made a progress, and it has been enacted to meet the needs of developing economy. So what has been done is that previously there was in 1940 there was a section 34 which provided that if there is an arbitration agreement, the party, before filing his first statement or taking any step towards that, applies to the court, only then the court would refer, otherwise the court will proceed with the case. Now the significant change is in Section 8 the word used is shall. It's in the mandatory form. It is couched in a obligatory form. It is rather preemptory. So whenever in a pending proceedings a party applies to the court under Section 8 to refer the parties to the arbitration on the basis of an agreement, arbitration agreement, the court shall refer. I'm stressing the word once again, the court shall refer. Now there is a significant, once again, amendment which says that only thing which can be seen by the judicial authority. Now I'm sorry, I have somewhere used the words courts. It's Section 8 is with regard to judicial authority. So Section 8, as per recent amendment, only thing with the court is with the judicial authority is required to see is whether prima facie there is a valid arbitration agreement or not. So only thing which is to be only requirement or the only scope under section 8 is for the judicial authority to see whether there is a valid arbitration agreement, and if there is, the court, the judicial authority finds that there is a valid arbitration agreement, then the court is mandatorily required to refer the parties to the arbitration. Second thing, which is important and change from 1940 Act. Under 1940 Act, the language used was before filing written statement or taking any step in the proceedings. That means it was the section 34 application for referring the parties under the 1940 Act, for referring the parties to the arbitration. If the party had taken any step in the proceeding, then he would be deemed to have given up his right, waived his right, and therefore no arbitration. But under the 1996 Act, the requirement is that before filing, first statement on the substance of the dispute. So a party can even apply for adjournment. Party can, after taking 3-4 dates, hearing adjournments for filing written statement, can still apply for reference under section 8, and the court is required to refer it to arbitration unless the arbitration agreement, the court finds that there is no valid arbitration agreement. This is one amendment. Second amendment is in subsection 3 of section 8, that uses the non-obstante provision. It starts with notwithstanding any judgment, decree of the Supreme Court or any court. So in other words, while deciding to refer the matter or not to refer the matter under section 8, the judicial authority is not bound by any judgment, decree of Supreme Court or any court. This is a recent amendment. It has been added in 2015 in order to encourage the parties to get their dispute resolved through arbitration once they have agreed. Although there are certain judgments, but now in view of 2015 amendment, that the judicial authority is not required to enter into that arena. But I can just, for your knowledge sake, I can just refer to the arbitration has been excluded. The scope of arbitration has been excluded in the case where the dispute leads to criminal offense, matrimonial disputes, guardianship, insolvency matters or winding up matters, testamentary matters, that is succession, somebody has died, property has to go, that is governed by statute, therefore. Then eviction of tenants where protection of rent laws is there. There is a very, very significant judgment. Earlier, previously, the Supreme Court had interpreted that all tenancy landlord-tenant disputes would stand excluded. But in a recent 3-judge bench judgment in Vidya Drolia, this is 2021 to SCC page 1. The Supreme Court has held that wherever the tenancy is not protected by a rent protection law, that is either Punjab Security of Land Tenure Act or Punjab Tenancy Act or Punjab Rent Law or Haryana Urban Rent Control Act, then these eviction of tenants can also be referred to arbitration if there is an agreement. And the last exclusion is with regard to trusts created, trust covered by Trust Act 1882. So on section 8, I am once again emphasizing, and please understand, this is very, very important. One, the word now used is shall, which is preemptory, obligatory, mandatory. Whenever the party applies, if he fulfills, if the party fulfills the parameters of section 8, the court is required to refer the matter to the arbitration, and only thing which is to be seen is whether prima facie a valid arbitration agreement exists or not. If the court comes to the judicial authority comes to a conclusion that there is a valid arbitration, then the matter is required to be referred. Now there is one more significant amendment in section 8 which would be important, and that is that previously, before 2015 amendment, only the party which had entered into an agreement was entitled to move application under section 8. Now the significant change is that any person claiming through or under him can also file an application. To explain it, if today A entered into an agreement with B, A unfortunately ceases to exist or has died, if he's a natural person, or if it is a company, it has been taken over, merger, all these things, or wound up, then, or a partnership firm which has been dissolved, any person claiming through or under that party can also file an application under section 8. So it is not mandatory that the person who has applied under section 8 must be a signatory to the agreement or party to the agreement. If he can prove that he is the person who claimed through or under that signatory, is also entitled to invoke the jurisdiction of the judicial authority under section 8. Now with this part, we with this discussion, we come to end of first part, that is civil judges, judicial authority. Of course, this also falls, this was also important for district judges and additional district judges, because in view of that commercial courts, the matter on original side can come to the court, and then section 8 can be filed. Now let us proceed further and come to section 8. Section 8, section 9, sorry, section 9. Section 9 is dealing with interim measures. Interim measures are, in common parlance, which can say that this is the power to grant injunctions or pass interim directions wherever required. The scope of section 9, which is highly debated, is now it is almost akin to the power under Order 39, Rule 1 and 2 in CPC, or we can say powers under the specific relief act where injunction provisions of injunctions are there, section 41, 39, 41, 42, etc. Now, when can this section 9 be invoked? Section 9 can be invoked by a party before the start of arbitration proceeding, during the arbitration proceedings, and at any time after the making of the award, but before it is enforced in accordance with section 36. So power of section 9 is available to the court. Now I am using the word court because it comes within the definition of court as per section 2E. Before invoking the arbitration, during the arbitration proceedings, and after the making of the award before its enforcement. What are the powers of court? What orders can be passed? Those are enlisted, and one can see it from reading of section 9. Section 9 subsection 2 talks of what interim measures can be taken. Now there is another provision under section 9, which is appointment of a guardian for a minor or a person of unsound mind for the purpose of arbitral proceedings. So the court has power to appoint a guardian for a minor or unsound mind under section 9. Now, but there is one very, very significant thing which has to be kept in mind, and that is, as far as power of the court under section 9 during arbitral proceedings is restricted. The court during the currency of the arbitral proceedings can grant interim measures only if the court finds that circumstances exist which may not render the remedy provided under section 17 efficacious. In plain and simple words, the court can exercise powers under section 9 to grant interim measures only if the court comes to a conclusion that the powers of arbitral tribunal to grant interim measures is not efficacious. So primary power to grant interim measures under section 17 during the arbitration proceedings is with the arbitral tribunal. Only if the court comes to a conclusion that that is not the efficacious remedy or that is not efficacious, only then during the pendency, during the currency of arbitral proceedings, the court can pass interim measures. Now there is another amendment that is in section 9 within bracket 2. It provides for a period within which the arbitral proceedings should start. I'm not using the word shall, it is should start is whenever there is a order of the court under section 9, the arbitral proceedings should commence within a period of 19 days from the date of such order, or within further time as the court may determine. Because it is like this, that section 9, the court passes interim measures. At the same time, the court can direct the parties that start with the arbitration proceedings within such and such time. Normally it is 60 days, but it can be more than that in the facts and circumstances of the case. This is with regard to interim measures, which is normally invoked by the parties whenever there is a dispute. Then next provision is court assistance in taking evidence. This is provided in section 27. Again, this power is with the court, not with the judicial authority. Whenever arbitral tribunal or a party with the approval of the arbitral tribunal feels that the assistance of the court is required for taking evidence, summoning witness, all these things, then application can be made and the court should extend its helping hand in recording of that evidence. Now let us further see how this act has been amended, because there is now time limit prescribed for the arbitrator to conclude. Section 29A was added, by which it was provided that the time limit for provided that the time for completion of arbitration proceedings would be 12 months. This was the amendment in 2015. Subsequently, realizing that sometime completion of the pleadings take a lot of time, therefore, by a recent amendment, now the date on which the period of 12 months would begin to run has been notified as the date of completion of pleadings. So provision is that from the date the pleadings are completed, the arbitration has to be concluded within a period of 12 months. Then there is a provision for extension with agreement, and maximum period prescribed is 6 months. That means up to 6 months the parties can agree and the arbitrator can thereafter can continue with the proceeding. But there is another provision which empowers the court. Again, I am using the word the court and not the judicial authority. If an application is made to the court may grant extension for a sufficient cause shown and on such terms and conditions as may be imposed by the court. So all of you would be faced with a lot of applications under section 29A for extension of time. There is again the wish of the legislature that such application should be disposed of within a period of 60 days. I have used the word wish because this is directory in nature. It is not mandatory, but the courts must make an effort to dispose of such application within 60 days. Now with this, we shift our focus to very important part of Arbitration Conciliation Act, That is with regard to filing of petitions under section 34, because an award passed by an arbitral tribunal can be challenged before the court under section 34. Now I will divide this section 34 discussion into three different parts, so that first part is limitation, which is there is a lot of debate and lack of clarity, I would say. The limitation under section 34 would start or begin to run only from the day a signed copy of the award has been delivered to the party. Please, I am repeating, requirement under section 31 subsection 5 is that a signed copy has to be delivered to each party by the arbitrator, and limitation or the period for filing petition under section 34 would begin to run only from the day the copy, a signed copy, has been delivered. In section 34(3), the word used is the party making application had received the arbitral award. Had received has been interpreted to say a signed copy of the award. So whenever question arises, what is the limitation, the period of limitation, you have to first examine when the signed copy of the award was delivered to the party which has filed petition under section 34. Unless it is established that signed copy has been delivered, the limitation does not begin to run. There are judgments on this aspect, but latest judgment is in the case of Dakshin Haryana Bijli Vitran Nigam versus Messrs. Navigant Technologies. Just note down the citation: 2021 SCC Online, Supreme Court, page 157. This is one part of limitation. Second part is that from the day the limitation begins to run. No, before that, I would like to highlight one more thing which by judicial interpretation has come, that delivery of copy to a clerk or a baildar or even counsel has been held to be not non-compliance of section 31 within bracket 5. What has been held is that in case of big organizations, it has to be delivered to the managing director or a responsible officer. So whenever there is a limitation to be calculated, please examine these aspects. Keep these in mind. I can give you 2-3 judgments on this. One is in 2011, this will be within bracket 4 SCC page 616. Second is in 2005, 4 SCC page 239. And third is 2012, 9 SCC page 497. The courts have even gone to the extent of interpreting that delivery of a signed copy of the award is not a mere formality. It is statutory requirement. One has to keep in mind. I think I'm overshooting my time, but this is a important subject topic. Therefore, I just want to take a little bit of time. Second aspect is that whether the court has a power to condone delay. Yes, the answer is yes, the power is there, but there is a cap, upper limit. Upper limit is 30 days. Now, please notice the difference. Original limitation is 3 months, 3 calendar months. Maximum period for which the maximum delay which can be condoned is 30 days. In February, we have 28 days or 29 days. So it will exceed calendar month. So please keep in mind the language, the words used in different provisions. Now, with regard to, let us now come to section 34. 34 is enlists the grounds for setting aside. This is in itself a big topic of discussion because the scope is endless. But just keep in mind 3-4 broad things. One, it is not appellate or revisional jurisdiction. The court is required to decide the case while keeping the scope of 34 in mind. We have to keep ourselves within the parameters of section 34 and we can't go beyond it. By way of explanation, now even it has been added that no review on merits is permissible. Then you will find that under section 34 subsection 2, even the public policy of India, which was the originally used phrase, the scope has been restricted. The scope restricted is fraud, corruption, violation of section 75 or section 81. So in other words, wherever the argument is raised on that such award is against public policy of India, then you have to see whether it falls within the parameters of public policy defined under section 34(2). Then there is another provision which talks of a patent illegality, which is an amendment by 2015 Act. The provision added is section 34 clause 2A, subsection 2A. It permits the court to interfere, set aside the award if the court finds that the award is suffering from patent illegality. There is now one more provision which is significant. If during the course of proceedings under section 34, the court finds that there is some error which can be rectified or some irregularity, the court can permit the arbitral tribunal to resume proceedings, so that on technical grounds the arbitral award should not be set aside. Then there is a provision for filing petition under section 34 after serving advance notice to the party. This is a procedure you can always insist upon. Subsection 36 requires that the court should make an effort to decide 34 proceedings within 1 year from the date on which the notice referred to in subsection 5 is served. I am once again emphasizing that scope of section 34 is listed. You have to carefully read those provisions, and this is not a jurisdiction equivalent to appellate or revisional jurisdiction. This is with regard to section 34. Last provision which I would like to refer is enforcement. Everybody knows that award is passed, then it has to be enforced. Earlier there was some dispute with regard to territorial jurisdiction. Now that has been settled. It can be execution of the award can be filed at any place. If one wants to read, judgment can be judgment is in Sundaram Finance Limited versus Abdul Samad and another. This is 2018 3 SCC page 622. In the last, I would only say that enforcement of the award is only after the period for filing petition under section 34 for setting aside the award has elapsed. Last but not the least is amendment in 2021, which is very, very relevant for all of you. I will just give you what was the initially the courts interpreted that the moment a petition under section 34 is filed, the enforcement of the award is ipso facto stayed, automatically stayed, it can't be enforced. Then there was amendment in 2015 which provided that unless the court grants stay, there would the award can be enforced. That means when 34 proceedings are filed, the court is required to consider whether to grant stay or not. If it is it consider that it can't be, no interim protection can be granted, the award can be enforced even during the pendency of the proceedings under section 34. But in section now there is amendment in section 36 by 2021 amendment, where the government has now introduced that if the court is satisfied that a prima facie case is made out that the arbitration agreement or contract, which is the basis of the award, was induced or affected by fraud or corruption, it has power to stay the award unconditionally. But for that you have to record reasons. Otherwise, conditional interim orders can be passed. That power exists. But unconditionally is restricted, and unconditional stay is restricted to satisfaction of the court if the award or the arbitration agreement or the contract is induced or affected by fraud or corruption. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Rest, Mr. Chandan Singh would now, Mr. Chetan Singh would take over and let us face the volley of questions which would come.
So, thank you. We already have a few questions. First of all, thank you so much for detailing everything out and bifurcating it into 3 parts. addressing each level of it. Sir, a quick question. I think I'll start with a small question first. Which court can execute a foreign award?
This is not part of discussion. I will have to check. So therefore, I would not like to answer without, because there have been a spate of amendments. We'll have to examine this aspect in detail.
So, moving to the next one. Now, this is more on the. This is not on the international level. This is more on the domestic level. It says if the award is passed at Mumbai, execution is filed at Faridabad, where the JD resides. JD wants to challenge the award and if the JD wants to challenge the award, in which court he should challenge, either in Mumbai, where the award was passed, or at Faridabad, where the execution was filed.
Yes, this is very, very important. See, please notice the distinction of two words: seat of arbitration and venue of arbitration. Seat is where either the parties have agreed on a seat of arbitration, particular place of arbitration, or the arbitrator has determined the seat of arbitration. If seat of arbitration, as you are saying, is in Mumbai, then award has to be challenged in Mumbai. But there is one important provision which must be taken note of. That is section 42 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. It provides that if any application has been made in a court under this part, that is domestic arbitration part 1. I think it is part 1 only. Yes, it's part 1. Then only that court would have jurisdiction. I can give you example. Arbitration takes place at Mumbai. Section 9 was filed in Chennai. JD resides in Faridabad. Once Section 9 has been filed, then only Chennai court, because it is in Chennai court or Madras court, therefore the jurisdiction is with that court. Section 42 specifically says that whenever the jurisdiction of a court has been invoked under this part by filing application under whatever provision, then that court only has jurisdiction. Second thing, as you have asked, question is where the award is to challenge. Award is to be challenged at a place where the seat of arbitration is there, unless there is another court which has the jurisdiction under section 42.
So moving to the next one, it says, what is the remedy if during the proceeding it is discovered that the arbitrator is close relative of the party and he refuses to recuse?
After the amended act, earlier there used to be proceedings before the court, but now only remedy available is after the award. The party can first file an application before the arbitrator. If the arbitrator refuses, then the only remedy available is after the award, because that amendment of 2015, 19 and 21 now do not permit intervention by the court.
But sir, I think this the question is about if we get to know the arbitrator is a relative of the party. So even then the arbitrator will go ahead and do the arbitration? Now
that's section 5 restricts the power of the court.
Okay, so if only the arbitrator can take a call on that.
Take a call. If it doesn't, then we have under section 34 there are other provisions also. I think there is amendment in section 13 and 14 where the arbitration award can be set aside after the award has been passed if the court comes to a conclusion under section 34 that yes, he was not partial, he was not impartial, or he was not neutral.
Okay.
This is my opinion. I am a student of law. It is subject to interpretations.
So
That is the caveat I am adding.
Certainly, sir. Another question, sir. Just a minute. Yeah. So the question is, what happened if it is alleged that the arbitrators have no jurisdiction?
Same thing. It will you will have to go. Now the judicial interventions are barred, basically.
Okay.
Please read the provisions of section 5 and section 13, 14, 15 and 16. I think everybody would get clarity that at what stage it is permissible to come to court.
So, answer, it is, I think this is again related to what we're talking about. Can we challenge the appointment of an arbitrator? Like, can the court intervene into that if someone comes in?
I have not, this is a little bit vague question. He has to just clarify how arbitration. One is that if the High Court appoints, one can go to Supreme Court and challenge that appointment of arbitrator.
Okay, I can request the member. So I'll read the entire question. It says,
if he specifies or clarifies that how he is wanting, because there is provision that now in view of amendment in section 12 and addition of the schedule, certain persons have become certain persons are debarred from being appointed an arbitrator. If a party one party appoints an arbitrator and if he is debarred, yes, his proceedings are totally without jurisdiction. You can go to court, but not for challenging appointment arbitrator. You can request the court to appoint an arbitrator or nominate an arbitrator. It can't be used, the word you can't be used challenge to the appointment of arbitrator. It's for appointment of arbitrator by alleging that so and so was is the arbitrator, but he is not qualified to continue with the arbitration in view of recent amendment. But please note there is a very significant provision in section 21 which talks of that 2015 amendment would start only from 23rd November 2015 or October 15.
Okay.
Number 2, the moment request for arbitration has been made, that day was determined whether unamended act would be applicable or amended act would be applicable. If the request was made before November 2015, then unamended act would apply. If it is after the amended act, then provisions of section 12 and schedule, the persons enlisted in the schedule would stand disqualified.
Okay. Answer, if an arbitrator is appointed by mentioning designation and not by the name, whether this kind of appointment is valid?
I will like a passover on this because I will have to see that. I can't offhand comment, and it is not good to comment without. I need to study. I have noted this. You can route your questions through Judicial Academy.
Yes.
I will examine this and answer.
Basically, the name is not mentioned of the person who has asked this question.
Please request them to forward the questions to the Judicial Academy. They will forward it to me. I will answer that, sir.
I will just forward this question to the. Okay, I think I've just mentioned that. I think, sir, there are no further questions for now. I think the questions are similar questions that what we've already answered about the arbitrator's role and everything. So it's the same question. But I think that is more or less we have done with the questions, sir. In time.
I apologize. I think I overshot my time, but I think that was important. That this act is becoming a big headache for some judicial officers, so therefore they need to.
So I think like we always discuss that this is not a teaching class, it's a discussion. It's just
That's right. That's
brainstorming session that
but
we
since
always
it is a comparatively new act, therefore certain clarifications are required. It's based on opinion, interpretations keep coming. Then there has been repeated amendments in recent past. Within 6 years, there have been 3 major amendments.
3 major amendments.
How,
yes. So even the law is evolving, and I think we're doing all of that. We're trying to just keep a pace with it. So I think, sir, that will, with questions, all the questions being answered, the session, we've already detailed everything. That brings us to the end of the session. So I think this recording, like we already know that this recording would be available on YouTube for future references, and members can also visit the Judicial Academy website. Over there, this training, this webinar recording, also the previous ones are all available over there, so you can rerun. Sir had mentioned a lot of citations. I was trying to write it, but I was missing out on one or things here and there, so I could not. I did not.
Only just for reference. Otherwise, once we start, we develop this habit of reading the statute itself. That is more beneficial, because judgments are interpreting the law as it exists. Right. Tomorrow there can be an amendment. Once there is an amendment, that old judgments are not relevant.
Absolutely.
The courts are required to interpret as per the statute.
Which is absolutely right, sir. And I think over the period of time, even in SSC, we have recently started, putting this feature, wherein if you go to the case, there are commentaries with the latest judgments and the important judgment rather on the case law. What we're talking about is already mentioned over there.
That's
so
right.
all the important judgments are also over there.
You can also add a cautionary note that after this judgment there is an amendment. All right, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I will like to thank you, sir, on behalf of Chennai Judicial Academy, all the members from district courts, all judicial officers. Thank you for giving your time, sir. And on behalf of SSC Online, Judicial Academy, and everyone who attended the session, I, Chetan Singh Gill, sir, would like to thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experience, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So we'll end this session now, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. चलिए बंद कर